Kia ora te whānau, I hukarati ko Andrew Dobudeaho. Today we're looking at the Gospel text for Sunday the 16th of August. It's Matthew 15 verses 21 through to 28. Now, I did have another option, but I chose this one because of its relevance and because it's one in many ways I'd rather have avoided. So we pick up the narrative at Matthew 15 verse 21. Jesus left that place, that was Gennesaret on the northeastern shore of Lake Galilee, and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Now Tyre and Sidon are up on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, and it's a Gentile area. It's not a place where Jewish people actually lived in any great number. Just then, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not answer her at all. All his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you just as you wish." And her daughter was healed instantly. What a text. You might imagine why I didn't really want to attend to it. The 7th of October 2023 was nearly 3 years ago. It started a whole process starting with a horrific terrorist attack by Hamas against Israel. I remember Netanyahu's words 2 days later. "We will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies for decades to come." I knew then that the fix was in. I've seen this movie before. Much has changed over the last 3 years. A great deal of critical historical research from credible historians has dispelled the myth of decades of Israeli victimhood, all riding on the back of the Holocaust. Not saying the Holocaust didn't happen, none of that at all, but as a result of the repatriation to the land of Israel, the land of Palestine, a lot of things have happened. While it's understandable that we see the October 7th Hamas attack as unforgivable, it's also possible to see it as understandable. Now, I realize that for many people I'll be walking into dangerous territory here. But it's no longer tenable to see Israel as not only the chief victim, but the only victim. Recently I came across a quote from Golda Meir. You remember her? She was the Prime Minister of Israel from 1969 through to 1974. These were important years. She said this, "We can forgive the Arabs for killing our children. We cannot forgive them for forcing us to kill their children. We will only have peace with the Arabs when they love their children more than they hate us." When you know the historical backdrop of the past 80 years, we start to understand why the Palestinians, why their hatred runs so deep. We then interpret Meir's words as the ultimate gaslighting. And that central phrase then stands out. We cannot forgive them, the Arabs, for forcing us to kill their children. Given the events in Palestine and Israel over the past few years, this text is a tough one. When we see a genocide against Palestinians being perpetrated in plain sight, when we see the perpetrators being God's chosen people, who historically have described those against them as dogs, hearing Jesus use this language is difficult. While it's true that in Jesus' time, Israel was a victim state. They had the Romans' legion sandal firmly pressed on their necks. Yet the attitude remains the same. The Jews then still regarded the Gentiles as dogs, as less than. While not seeing these actual words, we see the attitude even in Peter, even in early New Testament Peter. In Acts chapter 10, Peter, who is still really the chief of the apostles, is at Joppa. He's having some time there. It's around lunchtime. He's on the roof of the house of Simon the tanner. And around noon, he's feeling a little bit peckish. And he has a vision. He sees a blanket lowered from heaven, a blanket lowered from heaven with all kinds of unclean animals on it. And he hears the voice, "Arise, Peter, kill and eat." And he's appalled, he's horrified. He says, "I've never eaten or touched anything unclean." This happens 3 times, and his response is the same, 3 times. And then he's told that there are some men at the door, and he's to go with them. Well, as it happens, there is a knock at the door, and it's people, I think it's 3 men, who have come from Caesarea. They've been sent by the Roman centurion Cornelius. Sorry, just skipped a bit there. To come and bring Peter to them, to talk to them about the way. So, Peter goes, and he recognizes what he has just experienced has a lot to do with what is now happening. So in Acts chapter 10, Peter, as I say, he's gone with the emissaries to see Caesarea, and this is how he greets Cornelius. This is Acts chapter 10, verse 24. The following day, they came to Caesarea. Cornelius was expecting them and had called together his relatives and close friends. On Peter's arrival, Cornelius met him and, falling at his feet, worshipped him. But Peter made him get up, saying, "Stand up, I'm only a mortal." And as he talked with him, he went in and found that many had assembled. And he said to them, "You yourselves know that it is unlawful for a Jew to associate with or visit a Gentile. But God has shown me that I should not call anyone profane or unclean." Ooh, how that might have landed. Imagine you hearing that. I'm just demonstrating how common among the Jewish people this attitude was, and the extremity of the vision required to get Peter, who'd been through the whole Pentecost experience 7 or 8 years earlier, to get him to see differently. This attitude actually does still carry over to today. And because we read it in the Bible, in the New Testament, I want to suggest it's one of the reasons why so many Christians justify this behavior. After all, these are God's chosen people. They're entitled to feel special. They're entitled to their hubris and their arrogance. You've just got to go onto YouTube to see interviews with regular Israelis, to see this attitude repeated again and again. tragically. It may be that this little story of Jesus' foray into Gentile territory and his encounter with his Canaanite woman shapes the way that Christians embrace this particular perspective, often failing to realize that we too are dogs of the Gentiles. Surely not, we would say. We're God's chosen. Yet, to them, still Gentiles, still less. I, of course, want to give Jesus the benefit of the doubt, and it's possible for me to do that. Let's notice he's taken his disciples to a relatively safe place, perhaps looking for time to reflect and to process the death of John the Baptist and prepare for what's ahead, because he knows that the cross is not too far in his distant future. He's been clear that his calling has been to Israel, to God's covenant people, a people always intended to be a missionary people, a shining light and an example to the rest of the world. The call of Abraham was to that. Through you and your seed, all the families of the earth will be blessed, was the promise given to Abraham. Scripture always casts this exclusively as through Isaac and ultimately through Israel. Yet Abraham had 8 sons. First Ishmael to Hagar, then 6 sons to Keturah. While Isaac is portrayed as the son of promise, it's clear that Ishmael, and Ishmael is the one that Islam looks to, that Ishmael was blessed by God. You can see that clearly in Genesis 17 and 20. And presumably his 6 other sons, who came along much later, were also. Here's the thing. For Israel, the promise was through Isaac. That's how they read it. That's how they read the promise of blessing, to be a blessing to all nations. Yet they failed. Even exclusively holding that to themselves, they failed and sought to keep that blessing just to themselves. And we see how deeply embedded it is in their psyche. And here's Jesus. His mission to call Israel to be all that God intended. And when this Canaanite woman, one of their traditional historical enemies, approaches him for help, he uses what on the face looks like a highly offensive expression. Yet her reaction indicates 2 things. The first thing is that really like Cornelius and his team around him, that she's not surprised by it or put off by it. And the second thing we notice is that she's listening carefully to the words that Jesus actually uses. While nearly all translations into English use the word dogs, there are actually 2 types of dogs, and each have a slightly different word. They have different words. Most think of the mangy predator dogs, which roamed free, living off the scraps, digging into rubbish piles, rough and aggressive to maintain their survival. Yet the word that Jesus uses describes household pets, part of the family's life. And this is what she seizes on. Her love for her child is paramount. She will suck up any humiliation. And I imagine it's in warmth and generosity and with a kindness of a generous, gentle smile as Jesus responds to her and gives her what she asks for. One of the things that I've learned over the past decade or so is that if I don't ask, the answer is always no. There would be often things that I would think about, and I'd think, there's no point asking because they're not going to say yes. But what I realised is that if you don't ask, the answer's always no. And if you do ask, sometimes they will say yes. I've been surprised again and again when expecting a no, yet receiving a yes. This is also true with Jesus, with God. God is not curmudgeonly. He's not mean-spirited, but is generous, waiting to meet us in that place, our place of need. And I think that's also why Jesus says, ask and keep on asking. Seek and keep on seeking. Knock and keep on knocking. And it's not just for the one thing, because those who ask will receive again and again and again. Those who seek and keep on seeking will find again and again and again. And to those who knock, the door will be opened again and again and again. Jesus invites us into habits of asking and receiving, of seeking and finding, of knocking and having doors opened. There is a generosity in the grace, in the Spirit, in the attitude of God towards us, and invites us to ask. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. To seek, because if you don't seek, you won't find. And to knock, because if you don't knock, the door remains closed. The invitation for us is to continue to step forward, because we're never sure what the answer's going to be. But we can be sure that God always has our best interests at heart. Amen. God bless you.